Welcome to History in Small Scale. I'm Gary Tangeman. Today I'd like to just give you a brief overview and introduction to my diorama entitled Custer's Last Stand. As many of us are aware, students of history, we know that this battle took place around a river at the time known as the Little Bighorn, South Dakota. And it was a time when Custer, who had had great success during the Civil War, also became an Indian hunter and led the 7th Cavalry to their destruction because Custer was a man with a huge ego, and he had had great success defeating the Indians in smaller engagements, but had no idea what he was actually facing that day when he divided his approximately 300 troops into two different groups, and they were going to encounter a culmination of several Indian nations there in South Dakota. That was the greatest gathering, at least in recorded known human history that we're aware of, the greatest gathering of Indian tribes together at one time. He had no idea he was going to be facing an enemy of this size, but it's been estimated that there may have been as many as 2,500 Indian warriors gathered together, and Custer decided he was going to exterminate all of the Indians. Ended up finding that he was fighting many more than he could ever handle. He was hopelessly cut off from his other division and was completely wiped out. So this is a recreation, going back in history, trying to re-envision what this may have looked like. So once again, I've constructed this diorama on an 8-foot by 8-foot table in my garage, and have purchased these small, many cases, plastic figures. There are about 400 to 500 figures that we're using in this diorama. And having visited the actual Custer battlefield many years ago, we were able to see what the terrain looked like. So we've tried to recreate the terrain with the river running along it, and then on one side of the river, we have an Indian village. And it looks like hundreds and a massive number of teepees, but actually we've only had about 6 of those that we painted, but then we rearranged them and multiplied them through Photoshop, so it looks like an entire Indian village of several hundred. Then on the other side of the river, you're going to notice there's some hills, because the Custer battle actually took place on these hills as they encountered Indians in various places during the battle and over a period of time. The scouts for Custer had warned him. They said, this is the biggest gathering of Indians we've ever seen. But he blew them off and was hard-headed and felt like he would defeat them regardless of how many there were. So when the battle began, Custer had no idea the size of the army he was facing, but as the battle began to develop, he realized he was hopelessly outnumbered. After the battle was over and everyone had been killed, the news began to travel to the East Coast. Well, because this was on June 25th, it was only about 9 days later that the actual centennial celebration of our nation was held. And as the word began to spread to the East Coast and people heard that Custer had been defeated, it's been described to us, those of us that were around at the time when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Everybody was shocked. People can remember where they were when they heard the news. Well, this had the same impact on people back then that Kennedy's assassination had to many people alive at the time of his death. People heard the news that Custer was defeated, and they were absolutely shocked. They never thought it could happen. Now, purists who know the history and know the details of the battle are going to notice that I have used figures that have swords and sabers, and they're going to say, well, they never had sabers. They didn't have swords, and I realize that, but some of these figures were just too good to put aside, so I've included them in this diorama. So if you're a historical purist, please overlook that and just enjoy the battle for what it's worth. So here is Custer's Last Stand.